On this channel, I specialise in making really complex looking images easy to create. So just follow along with my step-by-step tutorial of this painting and you will amaze yourself. So as with all my other tutorials, I'm using the iPad Pro and the app Procreate, but the techniques and the process that I'm going to show you during this tutorial can probably be applied to different apps on different tablets too. But as such, within the app Procreate, I've opened a square canvas, which is one of the default sizes, and that's 394 by 394 millimeters, which is 2048 pixels by 2048 pixels. The color profile is set to the sRGB, and then it's 2.1 at the end, and it's there on the list, you can see. In terms of the colors, I've pre-selected just a relatively small range of colours. Each of these colours has what we call a hexadecimal code linked to it, and each of these codes is listed down in the video description. Or next to the codes is a link that takes you to my Patreon, and you can download the colour file for free to save you some time. And obviously that link takes you to my Patreon, where you can find exclusive content and support more content with this channel too. In terms of the brushes I'm going to be using today, well, I'm going to be using the airbrushing soft brush. I'm going to be using the calligraphy monoline, and that should do with the brushes. So the first thing we're going to do with our canvas is go to the wrench or the spanner. I'm going to turn on drawing guide. I'm going to edit the drawing guide. I'm going to turn on symmetry. I'm going to change the options to radial. I don't want the rotational symmetry on. And if you want to change the thickness of the line or however it's easiest for you, then feel free to do that too. I'm going to leave that as one layer and create a layer on top. I'm going to go to my brushes and I'm going to use the calligraphy monoline. Its default settings, which is why the little reset area is grayed out. I'm going to change the color to the first color, this black color. I'm going to have the size of the brush at 25% and 100% opacity. And first of all, I'm just going to aim somewhere in the center to create like an oval shape. And as long as you close the loop and hold it, it'll change to an oval for you. Now it's not going to be perfect, so we can just go to the transform, move it so we think it's a bit more central, rotate it so it looks like it's more in the center. I can also go to the adjustments, liquify. I'm going to go to the expand. I'm going to put the size at 60% and the pressure max. I'm just going to aim for the bottom region, tap it until it expands our egg shape, maybe just a little bit more at the top so the adjustments, do we don't want flat edges there as such. Maybe I'll turn that down to 50% and just tap it a little bit in the top region too. Try and expand those curves out. We could also go to the push, put it at 50% and just nudge the top down if you want to just flatten it. If we push the bottom as well, we can just make it a little bit more squat until you're roughly kind of happy with that shape. Then you can go to the black in the corner, drag into the middle of the shape, flood fill it, like so. I think I want to change the color of the background, so go to my layers, go to the background, I'm going to select the gray that's there. Just gets rid of the white, I think it looks a bit nicer. Then when we're going to add highlights to it now, they're really going to show as a contrast to the darker background. So on this layer with the egg, we're going to tap on the layer, we're going to activate alpha lock, which you can see has put like a checkered design in the background on the little thumbnail, which means when we go to something like the airbrushing soft brush, we use maybe tentatively the dark color. We have the brush size quite big at say 15%, 40% opacity, and we can just start to place in this darker color. We really don't want the black to remain for this, so I'm just going over it a few times. We're then going to change to the next color, which is this third color, orange. We're going to turn the size of the brush down to about 8% and really low at around 15% opacity. I'm going to start building in this area, the area where I want most of the shine to be. And we're going to do lots of these eggs, so it might be that in a different position, an egg might catch the light slightly differently, but we're going to do one to begin with that is just the generic egg shape. So we're going to have one of the eggs with the lighting predominantly up in this top right area. It's not to say we won't have any light down here, and you can start adding some down here as well. Follow the curve around a little bit, maybe reduce it down to 5%. Maybe just on the very edge, we can have just a hint of a secondary light impacting around the edge. We can bring more of it over here as well. Then we're going to change to the fourth color, still at 5% size, maybe even a little bit lower at 10% opacity. And we're going to start building in, again, this kind of secondary light source is going to perhaps impact here. We can curve it around that, pressing lightly, allowing it to build up a little bit more dramatically where this area is. Tap it a few times there, building a slightly brighter light. And I definitely want more light in this area on this example. So I can tap a few times, maybe turn it back up, 10%, go over it a few times. We're really getting a concentration of the light in this area. I'm also going to push it up towards this edge here too, just a little bit, but still predominantly here. Perhaps I'll just go into the center area and just lighten the whole thing a little bit. Let's go over it a little bit like that. Go on to the next color, which is the fifth color along. Turn it down, 5%, keep it at the 10% strength. And again, we just want to build in some of this light. Tap it a few times like this. And along this edge too. Maybe down here, this bottom curve down there. And just a little bit, just skimming the edge here. Now the beauty of the alpha lock is that you can just catch the very edge. So almost like you're aiming outside of the shape, but it's just catching it there. Well, a little bit more here, but again, more in this region. Let's put it up to 15% size and just really dramatically lighten up that top part a little bit more. And that's starting to look better. Go to the white, turn that down. Again, more specifically to the 5% size, and just tap in a highlight here. Now I don't want to do too much more at that stage. We're getting the general effect. Now if you're not entirely happy with the color, you can go to the adjustments, the hue, saturation and brightness. And if you want to change that hue, either make it a more kind of warmer or cooler, you can change the color of your kind of shiny egg to whatever you think will suit. I like the idea of a kind of golden color. It's at 50% is what you've been adding it as, but I'm going to dial it back a hint warmer to about 48. I think that suits it better. Once we've got so far, I'm going to go back to the drawing guide, edit the drawing guide and put it on the 2D grid. I'm going to change the size so that if you look at the boxes, it gets to a point where it just lines up with the outside edges. You can see the edges of the squares, just magnify them. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see that perhaps a little bit better. So the edges of these boxes, if I keep zooming out, just lines up with the absolute edge of our canvas, like that. I'm going to go to the layer, move it up. I'm going to go to the sort of blue dots, and I'm going to reduce the size. And I'm just going to move it upwards so it's slightly more towards the upper part than it is the lower part. There might be a little bit of trial and error with this, but yeah, roughly we're going for that effect. Then I'll go to the layer, duplicate it, transform, flip it vertically, and I'm going to move it down and I'm going to try and match what we've got up there. So if I just zoom out a little bit, you might just need a little bit of cross comparison just to compare it. I've got the two blue dots that line up on the guideline to make sure it's centered, but then the distance between there and there and there and there, well, we've got a grid to help us a little bit, to help us judge, like so. I'm going to duplicate the bottom layer, so that sits at the bottom of the eggs, and then we've got two now that sit above it, and I'm going to pinch them together to make one layer. Then I'm going to duplicate that, transform, flip it 45 degrees, and we've created two that are next to it. Duplicate the layer, transform, rotate it again 45 degrees and again. And then obviously we've got one more gap, duplicate, transform, rotate it 45 degrees, and we've created a really nice circular shape with these golden eggs. However, they don't have the lighting in the correct places for my liking, so I'm going to keep the bottom one where it is, but I'm going to merge all of the layers above that point together, pinch them together, And I want to be able to go around all of these shapes and add bespoke lighting how I think it needs to be. So what I'm going to do is go to the adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness. I'm going to turn the brightness down so it becomes pure black. Go to the layer with the eraser. The eraser set to the hard brush within airbrushing. I'm going to put it so I can control it quite easily. 8% size, 100% opacity. And I'm going to remove the top one because that has an egg that actually we want to preserve. That egg I'm happy with. So with the remaining shapes, I'm going to activate the alpha lock again. And we did use these colors and we slightly amended it with the hue, saturation and brightness, but not a problem. We only nudged it a hint and we can do that again with the rest once we completed them. But first of all, I'm going to go for the second color. I'm going to just drag flood fill. Let's get rid of the black color. It really doesn't remain much in the final egg at all. And if we need to add some darkness, we'll just add it back in. Go to the next color, third color, put it 4% maybe about, well, we'll try 20% initially. And think about where the light is coming from. So it's hitting the upper right part of the egg. So therefore, this section is going to be pointing towards the same point there. And we can just quickly go around now and just have a thought about which edge, not egg, which edge is leading towards the light. So this point, like there, is going to be hit by the light. This part here, this part here, this part here, there, and maybe somewhere kind of like that. So this brightest point is going to be represented in those locations, roughly speaking. So I'm going to put it up to 8% and we can just start adding more light into those areas. Just ramp it up a little bit. I think already that's starting to work a little bit better. We also have to think, okay, we've got the light hitting that part of each of the eggs, but then they're shiny, they're reflective, and they're going to pick up the light of the neighboring egg. So we'll turn it down a little bit, about 4%, and maybe about 15% strength opacity. If you think about the light from here, it's going to be impacting this part of that egg. This light reflects here on this egg. We'll just be quite systematic about it. This part is going to be slightly hitting this bit of this egg, but not too much. This bit certainly is going to impact it there. Let's think about this is quite bright, so it's going to reflect back on the underside of this egg. This bit is very bright, so again it should reflect back from this part of that egg. There's quite bright, so certainly around here, 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 and this is going to be bright, so we've kind of already got it covered there. Anyway, let's go to a lighter colour, fourth colour along, 3% size, still at 15-ish. There you go, let's put it down, 15%. So think about these bright colours, we can start building them in now. Let's start ramping that up. Back up to 5%. Let's soften that in a little bit. Okay, I'm going to turn it back down to about the 3%, and it's not really going to be enough to merely have that main point of light. We can start thinking about secondary lights. So there might be something off canvas here. There might just be giving it some light around that edge, for example, and likewise around here. So we just do it slightly off the edge of the egg, and it's just wrapping around there a little bit. And it's subtle, and then likewise here, and so on. Maybe the light again is just extending this around that side, extend it around here a little bit on this section here, and we're just increasing the sense that these are really more spherical. So the light, as you can see along the edge, it might also be just creeping around this edge a little bit. Let's go to an even lighter colour. Let's go for the fifth colour. Stay at 3%. Let's move the brightest point even brighter, just like we have on this one. And we just keep pushing it in that direction. Circle it round. We can always use the Gaussian blur to our advantage and blur this in a little bit anyway. Maybe let's turn it down to 10%. Just soften this in here a little bit. Just think about those edges. Nothing wrong with adding more highlights just around them. Maybe just a little bit here that's picking up, who knows, something that we don't quite see. Maybe a more focused light here as well. Slightly more focused light. It's a slightly different colour too, so that kind of works, doesn't it? And we could put that up 5%, just soften that in. Let's go for the white. Again, down 3%. We just need to really ramp up that extreme light source. It's hitting there and it's hitting all of these too. Then I'm going to go to the adjustments, Gaussian blur, blur it in. Well, it's about the 7%, works on mine. And you can see the effect is starting to work better. There's just a slight color discrepancy, so I'm going to go back to the adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness, and just dial it back 1%. I think that softens it in a little bit better. Then with the yellow, fifth color, still with a soft brush, perhaps I'm just going to start adding some things in that are a little bit more indented, like that is there. It's not quite on the edge, just a little bit more indented. I think will work. Turn it up 4% and just go over that a little bit more. Go back maybe to the orange, just go over that and soften it in a little bit. It's a little bit strong, that it's just not quite matching, so let's just soften it in so it looks more similar to the original egg. Maybe go back to the dark colour, 3% size, and we could just darken up some of the very edges, perhaps in places, just like we had around here. Perhaps we just need to, ever so slightly in places, just darken up that edge. And you can see where I'm doing it typically. We've got an indented and a light source. And I'm just following it up with a slightly darker edge in places. Anything that's facing this way, I'm going to do a slightly darker edge. I think that's starting to work quite nicely. To the white, 5% size, still 10% opacity, and we need to match some of that lightness, so let's just go over it a bit more. Let's just start thinking, adding more light, ramp it up, starting to more closely resemble that, have a more consistent look. Perhaps just last touch with the yellow, turn it down 3%, and exactly what we were doing before, so that is going to impact here. Let's just turn that up a notch. That is going to impact here. Turn that up a notch, maybe turn that down 2%. That is going to impact here. That is going to impact here. That here, and that here. And we're just accounting for all of the different kind of reflections now. Again, adjustments, Gaussian blur, and let's just blur it in a couple more percent. 3% should do. Okay, I'm going to merge them down, and now all of the eggs are on one layer, and I'm going to duplicate them. And the bottom version, I'm going to go adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness, I'm going to turn the brightness down to none. Then back on the adjustments, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to blur that in to about the 25%. Then with the transform, I'm just going to, from the top corner, just nudge it this way slightly. Remember, the light source is coming from over here, therefore the shadows will be more on this side. So it just gives them a hint more of a 3D effect. I'm then going to go to the top layer, create a new layer. I'm going to tap on it and activate the clipping mask. That means that anything we add to this layer now, so if I go into a brush that's nice and clear, medium hard brush, anything I add with a colour will be contained purely within the shapes of the layer underneath it. But for this effect, I'm going to go to the wrench, edit the drawing guide. I'm going to put it on symmetry, options, radial symmetry again. But I'm going to start with the black. I'm going to go to the calligraphy, monoline. I'm going to put it to about 25% size and 100% opacity. And just starting with this bottom point, I'm going to do a curve that generally sort of hugs there, but leaves a little bit of a gap. Then I'm going to start over here and another line. And as these lines go, I'm going to have it straightening up, and then I'm going to have it starting to curve the other way. Subtly at first, but then as we go further up, it's really going to move with that top edge like that. Next, on this same layer, I'm going to go back to the wrench symbol, edit the drawing guide. I'm going to stay on the symmetry, but I'm going to go to the option. I'm going to change it to quadrant. And I'm also going to put it on rotational symmetry. And with the monoline still, I'm going to put it down to about 15% size, still at 100% opacity. And I'll just rotate it so I can see it. And I'm going to curve it this way this time. So I'm going to curve it like this, curve it, and then it goes up. I'm not going to be too worried about this. Just keep it this kind of effect. Stay on here, adjustments, liquify, push, and I'm just going to play around a little bit with this, kind of give it a marbled look almost, or just a bit more of an organic. I can just push it around, play around with it a bit more, twist it around, and you can see you get some interesting effects. Perhaps I'll turn the drawing assist off. That way you can affect each of them individually. Whoops, I need to go to the adjustments, liquify, stay on the push. Now the push size at 18% and pressure 99 or max. And we can go in and just further adjust these. So they're all slightly different. So it's not completely uniform. I'm doing it around the edges, trying to curve it around some of the edges so it preserves that kind of effect of it being rounder. I think that works quite nicely. And on that layer, I'm going to put on alpha lock now. I'm going to go in with my airbrushing soft brush. I'm going to switch to, well, for the black layer, I'm going to switch to this color, or not the black layer, but the black detail, switch to this color. And if I put the size at about 3% and 10% strength, I'm going to go into the areas now where we have some of the highlights, and maybe the 10% is a bit weak, so let's put it up to 20%, let's see. And we go for the highlights, and we just want to add a bit more of a light reflecting on the black areas where the light is. So let's turn it up 30%, and the color isn't very strong, to be fair, so maybe we could try a stronger color. Let's go in with the orange, and this time we're definitely going to have to turn that opacity back down. So we'll put it down to about 20%, and we can start adding a bit of a disruption to the black, and it just adds a bit more of a really satisfying sense that the shine is also reflecting on the black areas too. So we can just soften in anywhere where it's really light. We can just soften in the black areas like so. Pushes the black shapes back a little bit, and we'll do the same on this one. Same on here, just a touch. Go for this one. Obviously it's very bright here, so we'll use this orange. Go over some of the black shapes and here as well. We still want them to look darker than the surrounding colours, but it's fine to knock them back a little bit. Over here, and in this section, and that's working really nicely for the black shapes. And for the white, we're going to add probably darker, so we'll go to the, let's go for the black, but we're going to turn it significantly down, so we're going to put it at around 10% strength, whoops, 3% size still, and we're going to look for the darker bits. So here's a dark section, so we want to ramp up the dark areas. It's only affecting the white, and this should start to give us more of like a silver look. Remember, it's only going on the white areas, and I did it quite a lot just so you could really see that it is adding. Start it back a little bit. We only want to add it where we want a strong shadow. So we're doing the opposite now, we're adding darker colours. Again, we want to preserve the real lightest bits where the highlights are. And you can see the difference now between those two. It just subdues it, gives it a nice metallic silver kind of look. So again, we've got dark sections here, so we really want to subdue it, knock it back. And then when there's a light section, it really just brings out that sense of sheen, almost like a silver look. And here, again, we're just trying to go over where the dark bits are. So if there's a dark section underneath, then you need to go over the white bits too, that correspond. I'm going to go to the drawing assist, turn off the drawing guide, and then obviously we're just left with the image. I've found a font that I want to add to this, so I'm just going to paste it in. And you can put your message in the center. Obviously I've got Easter theme, so I'm going to add that to the center. And yeah, we've ended up with something that would be a really nice design that you could use as a card, or yeah, however you want. I'm going to extend this slightly further for my patrons over at Patreon and add some extra kind of details. But if you have followed this along and you've enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe, and don't forget the bell notification to make sure you're notified of all my future videos too. Thanks for watching, see you soon.